Hello and welcome back to The Investor's Opinion. Is NVIDIA a good investment? So essentially NVIDIA's business model is broken down to four aspects. The first being gaming, their biggest, being 50% of their current revenue structure. The next is data centers. These are a little smaller, but are expected to grow at insane rates with a capital average growth rate of about 50 plus. We also have software tools and the professional development instruments that are provided by NVIDIA. So these are things such as the GeForce Shadowplay, the machinima tools that have just been released. We also have, lastly, AI and autonomous vehicle production. And this is something that has kind of been rumored about for a while now, but does produce some revenue and is something they spend a lot of money on in research and development. Moving straight into our qualities. These guys are market leaders in pretty much every industry they enter into, except for the rumored AI and autonomous vehicle segment. This is because an old NVIDIA worker or employee now works for ARC Innovation. This analyst essentially said that Tesla's chipsets for autonomous vehicle and AI that goes in them is better than NVIDIA's current chipsets. However, he is a former employee and we don't know where NVIDIA has gone since then. So we take his word with a grain of salt, but something we have to take note on. Another big strength for NVIDIA is their amazing ability to be so diverse in such a, I guess you could say, undiversible way. So they are stationed specifically in technology and they don't deviate outside of that other than the autonomous vehicle part, but they only make the technology parts for the vehicles, so still within technology. But they are diversified along every aspect of technology, from software to subscription-based services to consumer, professional, developer, as well as sensory, as well as data center, as well as pioneering deep learning technology and other solutions like that. They just are so deep and wide in this sector, and they are very powerful and have a lot of weight and push around a lot of other companies with respect to their dealings and what they do. Lastly, it's this software ecosystem that is probably one of the more immediate strengths of NVIDIA and is something that we as investors should look very closely on. If they continue to develop and the growth and user rate of these tools that they produce intends to grow and more users use them, the system itself will benefit and NVIDIA will do fantastically. It doesn't cost a lot and you get a lot of profit from the other end from selling the software. So what we're expecting is great growth there, and we want to see utilization and facilitation of all their tools working harmoniously together, which currently they do really, really well. Now moving next straight from the good to the bad, looking now at weaknesses. Not many here. Most I can just see is that it's an incredibly volatile stock. So expect a lot of weird movements every now and then that don't seem very explainable. Take advantage of these availabilities. Lastly, obviously, at the time I originally first started to make this video about a month ago, we saw very, very high valuations of $596 a share and over 100 PE ratios on NVIDIA. Thankfully, not so much now, but it is still pretty highly valued with respect to its intrinsic value. Do I think it will go down from there? Probably not. The growth story and the moat that NVIDIA provides investors will probably maintain a very, very strong base, and investors will look to jump in at points whenever they can find it. Next, we have opportunities, and these are what we want to see as investors and what we really, really want to drive home as the people holding capital with these companies and owning these companies. We want to see them push forward into new verticals or expand currently existing verticals into a more dominant and better revenue producing place. Obviously, the future data center is the biggest incentive for investors in the medium term. This is the 50+% CAGR over the next few years, and we want to see that translate into revenue and then hopefully into an increased share price. And obviously at a more long distance and long-term view, 10 to 20 years, we want to see the autonomous vehicle and strong AI come out and begin to dominate in industry-specific areas where it can be implemented safely. And we want to see NVIDIA be one of the market leaders in that. And if we see that happen, we can really expect NVIDIA's revenue to just explode. And lastly on our SWOT analysis is clearly threats. And threats come from two specific areas. Tesla in respect to the long-term vertical of AI and vertical integration into autonomous vehicles, and any of the other semiconductor components such as AMD or Intel plus other that may enter into verticals with technology that might actually for a time being be superior to NVIDIA's. And we don't want to see that if we're investing in NVIDIA. We want to see them maintain market and technical dominance over their competitors. So the last thing we do with our qualitative part of our analysis for all of our stocks on this channel is we look at the Warren Buffett famous thing, the economic moat, what protects your investment over the long run with respect to their growth story. NVIDIA's economic moat clearly comes from their diversified range of products and the facilitation they use to almost allow users to have unlimited accessibility and utilization of the hardware that they provide. Also, the ARMS deal. It's a very important deal that we need to understand as NVIDIA takes hold of the deeper and more portable hardware and device industry. NVIDIA hasn't really jumped into the portable device industry, but will likely do so if the ARMS deal is corrected. So after our qualitatives, as spoken before, it's now our quantitatives. Now what we're going to look at now is multiples, a discount cash flow analysis, then we'll have a look at the more boring documents like the balance sheet, the income statement, and cash flow. So NVIDIA's multiples are incredibly high. We have about 90, and we actually expect it to go down with future PEs down to 50, which shows a credible amount of growth in revenue. And what this means essentially is that PEs become irrelevant or incredibly hard to find a good argument to use them. And this is because PEs you run on past earning decisions and future on predicted future earnings. And as you can see, the disparity between the two sort of indicates that the current value is pricing in the growth of the company, not just the earnings. And this means the ratio, you can't really compare it to other industry leaders, and you can't really compare it to its own historic, as if you look back further and further at NVIDIA's historic PE, it's been very low down in the 30s and very high up into the hundreds. And this isn't because of the stock price being too high. It means that the stock price is essentially going, we know this company is going to grow, and therefore we are going to buy more and bid the price up even higher. So the PE ratio doesn't indicate a sell or a bad thing for the stock. It just is an indicator of its growth. Now, there's something different that we're going to do today in regards to quantitatives, and that's look at the discounted cash flow models. Now, I have provided with 3 new models that you guys can have a look at in respect to exactly how they work, and I kind of hope that you guys Google some of these to understand them a little bit more in depth. So a discounted cash flow model essentially looks at cash flow and then discounts it to future earnings. And essentially what it does is it tries to give us an intrinsic value. It's a complicated equation, and most of the time there is software and online services that can do it for you, and you can adjust certain variables instead of having to do the model yourself. But the 3 models that I have looked at today are in regards to its future cash flow in respect to its equity, and one based on dividends, as NVIDIA is a oddly weird, cheap dividend payer. So what we try to do with these discounted cash flow models is try to evaluate a good intrinsic value or a buy point that we can look at. So what's really good about this stock is that it's actually incredibly close to and actually on one of these DCF models, which after this pullback almost indicates a big buy. And in fact, I have been buying. So now let's, after we've had a look at these intrinsic value calculators and modeling, and we can see that clearly there is some really good value to be had here. We can also see that the balance sheet shows just rigid, just fantastic strength, with anywhere around $14 billion in total current assets and a mere $2 billion in total liabilities. This is just shows you how strongly positioned Nvidia is. Even as it's going through a crisis, it doesn't have to worry as it is so financially stable. We also have a decent free cash position. We have a decent amount of liquidity. However, obviously all these metrics are likely to change quite a bit, as the arms deal going through would likely cause a few of these financials to change quite drastically. And as we know that these huge $40 billion purchase-like agreements usually take a wee bit for the return of that investment. Now looking at the income and cash flow of NVIDIA, we can actually see some really good results actually. We see a $3.87 billion in revenue made this last quarter, and we can see that the net margins of this company are actually 16-ish%, which is just phenomenal, because what that means is that the company is actually positioned in the top 96 percentile of all chip makers in regards to its net margin ability. So it's very good at making a lot of money on this particular subject. Lastly, looking at the finer points of the analyst predictions in regards to revenue and growth, we can see a total NVIDIA growth or CAGR of about 20 to 25%, which is a great investment for such a very stable company. So those are the quantitatives. It's pretty simple with this company. They make a lot of money and they make a decent amount of profit on that revenue. And we're going to likely see an increase in this very rapidly over the coming years when it comes to NVIDIA with respect to their verticals finally starting to see some ROI. So finally, we can now move straight into the technicals. And I have quite a bit of an in-depth one with this one due to the fact that we've had a big pullback. So the technicals here are quite interesting because we can see that after our big run-up, we've actually managed to have a bit of a pullback. And what we're going to be seeing is some interesting chart movement. And so if we're going to now just go to the chart, and as you can see, once we blew off top, we actually gapped up a small one, but enough of one to make a notable difference. What happened is that once we hit the top, we needed to sell down to a point of resistance. When we sold down, we actually sold all the way down from that blow off top back down to the gap. And this is the gap solidified by the inside the purple box, the orange rectangle at the very bottom. As you can see, we went in, filled this gap, and has now bounced off of it. Now, once we had done that, we saw a downward sloping trend form, as you can see from the triangular pattern shown on the graph. We bounced off the inside of this, which is not good. These are the points of breakout that we want to see from a technical perspective when it comes to the stock. However, we found a base, as expected, near the gap. And as it got closer to its inflection point, where these two lines meet, we saw actually a breakout. And as you can see on the current graph in front of you, we are still trading within the box of high to low with respect to this trading channel. But this movement upwards and through the downward sloping trend is very positive. And in fact, we came back down and filled another small gap as we were bouncing along before we've started to make our small gap up at the end of the Friday session at the US markets. So what we're seeing from a technical perspective is some positive consolidation at a higher level, which is exactly where you want to try and position yourself before the next run up. Lastly, we can now look at the RSI and MACDs, and we can see that the RSI currently is quite strong. It is holding above that 40 and is looking to start making its way back up. It shows a long-term bullish trend for this particular stock. The MACD, however, is showing some bearish momentum, showing us a case of worse than expected outcomes when it comes to the current situation for NVIDIA. This is fine. We might be able to see just some more flat consolidative movement, which would essentially cool off these indicators to a position where they would have a really good potential to run up and break into new highs, hopefully in the coming 6 months to a year. Speaking from a bearish perspective as regards to something that we do not want happening for the price movement of NVIDIA from a technical perspective is for it to break down further, because this would mean that we have very little support. And this is due to the fact that we've moved up quite rigidly and quite fast recently, which means there's a lot of volatility happening in the market from even just a bigger, larger time perspective. And what we can say is that anything breaking down below that 460 mark could yield some really, really bad short-term effects for the market, as NVIDIA is actually quite a core part of the NASDAQ. So that does it for me. Thank you guys all for watching to the end. If you did, please don't be afraid to smash that like and subscribe button, guys. It helps me out a lot. I have also actually done something new here with this video. In this channel, I've actually started a Patreon. It's not as like flushed out yet, and it doesn't have any exclusivity, but right now these videos take a lot of time for me to make. And I'm a student and I don't have a job, so I don't have a lot of money. And people were asking me through my Facebook page if there was any way to financially support me before this channel hopefully gets to that point of monetization where I can self-sustain and self-fund myself to produce these videos. So the Patreon is at the top of the channel. If you go to the channel and you go to see the top right, you'll see the link. If you do feel like supporting me, that would be greatly appreciated. I'm hoping to provide some merchandise as well. I've got this cool design for a white hoodie with the investor's opinion logoed across the front of it. I think that would be quite cool to have, especially just to try and get the name out there, and also just to be proud of what I'm creating here. And I know a lot of you guys would probably enjoy that too. So don't forget to also look at those that Twitter and that Facebook feed. I post quite a bit. It's always quite fun to talk about the developments in the market. And if you like that, just jump on there and hit that like there. I'm very responsive, so if you have any questions, hit that comment section down below. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Good hunting. This cat is the reason why I can't have nice things.